A mother in California says her 7-month-old baby was kidnapped from her arms after she was knocked unconscious by a man outside a retail store. She was talking to the media, so why has she stopped talking to the police? I'm Elizabeth Vargas, and America's News starts right now.
Tonight, the push for peace in Ukraine. The White House says Vladimir Putin is ready to talk.
Did Putin promise to do a meeting with Zelensky, a direct meeting, in the coming weeks?
He has, and I understand accommodations for that meeting are underway.
But how much accommodating will Russia require before a peace deal can get done? Then what's more important, good science or good PR?
They tried to control this narrative and act like none of us had any long-term health risks.
Internal emails reveal the Environmental Protection Agency in East Palestine, Ohio, was surveilling an independent scientist whose data showed the community was still at risk.
They're clearly not serving the community they're supposed to protect.
And later, an uptick in tick bites, and some of them are causing nightmarish, severe allergies to red meat and dairy. We'll speak to a victim about the risks to you and your family.
All right, lots of news to get to tonight, but first, a 7-month-old baby is missing in Southern California in an alleged kidnapping where the truth is proving as hard to find as the endangered infant. Police in San Bernardino County have been looking for Emmanuel Harrow since last Thursday. His mother, Rebecca, says that around 7 p.m. that evening, she was changing Emmanuel's diaper outside her truck in the parking lot of a Big Lots store. She claims a man came up behind her and knocked her out. And when she woke up, Emmanuel was gone.
I came over here, I parked right here in this edge. When I was coming over here, I smelled the baby went to the restroom. It's like, okay, Papa, don't worry, we're gonna change you. I was gonna get the diaper and somebody said, hola. And I didn't see nothing since. I woke up right here on the floor and I didn't see Emmanuel.
It is a terrifying story. The problem is police say they have found holes in that story, and when they confronted her about it, she stopped talking. They are now saying they cannot rule out foul play. Police say they have searched Rebecca Harrow's home, but they haven't shared if they found anything incriminating. They're now reviewing surveillance video from around the area for clues. So far, there's been no mention of any corroborating footage or eyewitnesses to back up that mother's account. Another layer of suspicion involves the father of the baby, Jacob Harrow. He and his prior wife both pleaded guilty to willful child cruelty, a felony, after their then 10-week-old daughter was admitted to a hospital with broken bones and serious injuries in 2018. Despite that sordid history, Emmanuel Harrow's grandmother told our affiliate KTLA that she believes the parents are innocent.
They're not going to hurt that baby. That couple were just homebodies.
The grandmother also shared that Jacob Harrow refused to allow his wife to take a lie detector test without a lawyer present. A group known as the Uvalde Foundation for Kids was conducting its own search for the baby and offered $5,000 in reward money for any information. But the organization's founder has now called all that off, saying in part, quote, "Something is not right in this whole picture. We hope law enforcement will continue to pursue the case." We should note, as of now, police have not arrested or charged the parents with any crime. But the fact is, child abductions by random strangers are exceedingly rare. Joining me now by telephone is Heather Walker. She lives in San Bernardino County and went to a vigil for Emmanuel Harrow on Sunday night. She says the parents were not at that vigil. Heather, thanks so much for joining us and coming on the show. What's been the community reaction to this mother's story and the police investigation?
The initial reaction was shock, because that doesn't happen out here in Yucaipa. It's very safe, and if we see something, like, people will step in. But now everybody once we saw that firsthand, her interview, everyone was very suspicious from the get-go. And it wasn't adding up. I personally saw the mother, Rebecca, at the day of the they were hosting a search party, and I went to do the search party with them, and I just thought it was very strange that she was walking to her car just fine, or a car in the parking lot just fine, and then the news vehicles started coming in, and then she limped away. So at that point, I kind of had a very bad feeling that we weren't searching for a child in the area.
Did you have these suspicions before police went public with their suspicions?
Yes, I had it from the get-go. Right when I saw her interview was a big red flag. Like I said, it just doesn't happen where someone walks up behind you out here, knocks you out, and takes a baby, and no witnesses, and it's a very busy street.
Yeah, apparently, I know you've spoken to some people who were working at these stores at the time. Did anybody see Rebecca Harrow, or more importantly, see the baby?
From what they told me, nobody saw the baby.
They saw her, but not the baby, because that's what we've heard about people who were at the football game that she had been at previously. She said she had left the football game to go buy her other son a mouth guard that he needed to play. That's why she was at the store, she said. But nobody at that football game saw the baby either.
No.
So tell me about the vigil and why it was so important for you to go.
It was important for me to go to be his voice because he couldn't, and his parents obviously weren't. Since they didn't even attend that, which I thought was very strange, but a lot of our community showed up for the same reason, and that was, you know, to pay our respects and support him, Emmanuel, and be his voice.
Yeah, a 7-month-old baby. It's really, really
Yeah.
heart-wrenching. Yeah. Heather Walker, thank you so much for joining us. Let's bring in our experts now. Laura Matias is a journalist who's closely followed this case. She's the host of the Hidden True Crime podcast on YouTube channel. I'm also joined by retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, a NewsNation law and justice contributor. Thank you both for being with us. Jennifer, Rebecca Harrow has now stopped cooperating with police after these inconsistencies emerged in her story, according to police. She said, as I just said with our other guest, that she was at her son's football game. She left with the baby. She told police to go to the store. Nobody at the football game ever saw the baby. She also said she got a black eye when she was hit by the abductor. But now there are reports she may have had that black eye for many days, even weeks prior to this alleged attack.
Right, exactly. Her statement had so many holes, Elizabeth. Whenever you look at somebody who's making a statement like this, you look at a linear track. Does it make sense in terms of the time frame that she's giving? And it doesn't. It's all over the place. As she states items, it's as if she's making them up. That black eye is not a recent black eye. Speaking as a tactical medic, that is a healing black eye from some time ago. She spoke of baby Harrow in the past tense. And by the way, Elizabeth, when is the last time anybody has seen Emmanuel?
That's a good question. Lauren, how quickly did her story fall apart, and how quickly did suspicion turn possibly to her from police? We just heard from people in the community, but what about police?
I think that there were eyes on this family for quite some time. As you mentioned, there were these charges that the family has. Their stories were not the same. Both the father and the mother, their stories change. In one story, she's saying that she got hit from behind after hearing Ola. And then in another story, she's saying that she received the black eye after being hit in the front. Things got very confusing. And on social media, when people started discussing this, especially those that are local and those further away, as the story started to spread, people were comparing notes and sharing different interviews with the different media outlets and pointing out these inconsistencies. And so I can only imagine that the law enforcement was a lot more tight-lipped than, comments on social media. But from comments on social media, I imagine that law enforcement was right there as well, wondering and comparing the inconsistencies.
And then, Jennifer, we have these really disturbing this criminal history from the baby's father, Jake Harrow, who was found guilty of felony child cruelty along with his not this current wife, Rebecca, but his previous wife. They had a 10-week-old daughter who suffered terrible injuries, including acute rib fracture, 6 healing rib fractures, skull fracture, brain hemorrhage, swelling of the neck, and a healing leg fracture. Jake told authorities he had dropped the baby while bathing her and then proceeded to blame his then-wife for the rest of the injuries. Those injuries were on a 10-week-old baby.
Right, exactly, Elizabeth. And when you look at somebody who has that sort of a history, that tends to follow patterns. People don't just stop abusing their children. And typically people who don't abuse their children all of a sudden abuse their children. Those injuries were in various stages of healing. I think this is a very cruel and vicious person that could do such damage to a young infant.
To a 10-week-old. We don't know what happened in the case of the 7-month-old. Lauren, Jake and Rebecca Harrow have a 2-year-old son and another older son. Do we know what's happened to them as this investigation goes forward?
Child Protective Services has stepped in. And so you can only imagine if this alleged kidnapping, Elizabeth, is true. Can you imagine that not only are they looking for their 7-month-old, they're also grieving now children that are no longer with them because CPS has stepped in. And so, I mean, and none of us know, right? Only law enforcement will be able to tell us in the end. And so I think, though, that also looks suspicious. And as Jennifer pointed out, this past charge does not look good. And the fact that CPS has now stepped in is very, very concerning.
But also those children might be witnesses, especially not the 2-year-old, but the older child.
Absolutely. And again, we don't know when the last time anyone saw Emmanuel, baby Emmanuel, right? If he wasn't at the football practice, when was the last time anyone saw him? And if those children saw something, they could be able to tell us when the last time anyone saw baby Emmanuel.
Yeah, Jennifer, this is so unusual, a case involving a baby, isn't it? I'm hoping you're going to say yes.
No, unfortunately, every week I cover these stories of these babies, and it's terrible how some parents treat their children. And unfortunately, I don't have much hope for Emmanuel.
Well, let's pray for a miracle here. Laura Matthias and Jennifer Coffindaffer, thank you both so much for joining us tonight. All right, we're going to turn now to another shocking story. It's taking place in Tallahassee, Florida, and it's the latest act in a crime saga of in-laws and outlaws. A 75-year-old grandmother, the matriarch of a wealthy Florida family, will finally be facing a jury in the sensational case of a family feud that turned deadly. Jury selection is underway in the long-awaited murder trial of Donna Adelson. She's accused of being the mastermind in an alleged murder-for-hire plot that left her former son-in-law dead in 2014. Dan Markle was a law professor at Florida State University, and he had divorced Adelson's daughter, Wendy, in 2013. The split was acrimonious. It allegedly sparked a bitter custody battle between the couple involving their 2 sons. Now, police say Adelson concocted the murder plot to get rid of Markle, who was preventing her daughter from returning to Miami with the kids to be closer to the family. Adelson allegedly got 4 other people to take part in the deadly scheme as well, including her own son. After Markle was shot dead, police say Adelson then tried to make a getaway. But she did not get far. Adelson was arrested at Miami International Airport as she and her husband were about to board a flight.
I'm sorry.
That flight, police say, was a one-way flight to Vietnam, a non-extradition country. As Donna Adelson prepares to face murder charges in court, the other 4 people have already been convicted of murder and sentenced to prison. That includes Donna's son, Charlie, who is serving a life sentence. His ex-girlfriend is also serving a life sentence for her role as the go-between with the 2 hitmen, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Riviera. It's worth noting that the victim's wife, Wendy Adelson, has so far not been charged in this case. For more now, we're joined by former homicide prosecutor Matt Murphy. This story is absolutely bonkers. She's 75 years old, the matriarch of this family, and it was all over her daughter moving a couple hours closer.
One of the interesting things about working homicide units is you would be amazed how many, or maybe you wouldn't be amazed, how many murders begin the morning in family court. And essentially what happened was they lost a big family court ruling. He sued essentially to keep the kids in Tallahassee.
Where he was teaching, it's where his job was.
Right, and like a million other divorces. She wanted to move, she wanted to take the kids, he didn't want that. They actually, after the murder, they changed the children's names, they did relocate them, and they actually passed a law in the state of Florida to prevent things like this from happening in the future. They essentially erased the father from the children's lives completely. So there's a lot here. The evidence against her is really interesting because her son, Charlie, has already been convicted of this. But there's a pattern of phone calls before the killing that are, I think, very compelling.
Well, how do they know what's on those phone calls?
Well, they don't. They don't. So this is what would be called circumstantial evidence, but circumstantial evidence can be very, very powerful in a common sense sort of way, which is the way the jury is going to be instructed by this very no-nonsense trial judge to consider it. And essentially, it would go from Donna Adelson calling her son Charlie, who then would immediately call one of the different co-conspirators in the case that have already been convicted, and it would they could follow the phone calls down the line, down to the hitmen. And they did it over and over, both before the murder and after the murder.
So are any of the people who've already been convicted going to testify against Donna?
Well, yes, they're going to testify regarding the conspiracy itself. Now, they can't testify directly against her, except for one of them. There's a woman who was Charlie's girlfriend who's already been convicted.
She was the go-between between the hitman and Charlie.
Yeah, and what Donna Adelson was doing is she was actually paying her money on the family dental business, like business checks, and she was signing those personally. So what the defense is going to argue here is they're going to argue, yes, she was an accessory after the fact is what it's called. But in the state of Florida, number one, she has not been charged with that, which I think is a very interesting move by the prosecution here, which has done a fantastic job so far. But they could charge that as what's known as a lesser related offense or a lesser offense. They didn't do that. So the prosecution's made the decision to go all in.
All for broke.
Going for broke, right.
You know, listen, the characters in this story are pretty remarkable. Dan Markle, the victim who was murdered, was a stellar, outstanding law professor at Florida State University in Tallahassee. He was an Orthodox Jew, and one of these staggering things this 75-year-old grandma is accused of trying to do was she tried to bribe him with $1 million to give up his 2 sons and let his sons move back to Miami. That didn't work. Then she told her daughter in an email, which prosecutors do have, that dress the kids up as Hitler or baptize them as Catholics. All as a way to drive a wedge between father and sons.
Right, and she hated him. And there's a very, very clear documentation of that in emails and in the lead up. She had all the motive in the world. Now, motive is not an element to murder, but it certainly is something that can play very heavily in the minds of jurors when they're considering a conspiracy like this.
What about the fact that she is caught, she calls her son Charlie on the jailhouse phone.
Right, after the
bump. Like my mom often does when she calls me, thinks she hangs up and she doesn't.
Right.
And Donna, the grandma, thinks she hangs up with the jailhouse phone, doesn't, and is recorded, because all jail calls are recorded, saying, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to go to a non-extradition country.
Right.
Like maybe China, or wait, I don't want to go to China. Vietnam, I'll go to Vietnam.
Right. And the court has already ruled that that is going to be admissible, and it's going to be introduced under what is called consciousness of guilt. So the prosecution's going to be able to argue, essentially, she's so innocent. Why is she talking about killing herself? And why is she about to run to a country specifically because they have no extradition treaty with the United States? And the jury's going to be able to consider that.
Yeah. Why has this taken so long? This murder happened in 2014. It's 11 years later that she's finally going to trial.
You know, for a murder of this complexity, believe it or not, this has not taken that long. Believe it or not, considering we have all these conspirators. And the prosecution, like I said, they've done a very good job of methodically going through. They flipped one of the 2 hitmen, and he's testified against everybody in the case. So,
what about the daughter?
Well, the daughter's the big question mark. The state attorney in Florida has always considered her a quote-unquote uncharged co-conspirator, and they've granted immunity to her for her testimony. But but it's only what is known as use immunity. In other words, she can testify, and the words she says during her testimony can't be used against her, but all the other evidence still could. So she's not out of legal jeopardy. She has not received what's called transactional immunity, and a lot of people think she was involved. She's presumed innocent, has not been charged.
Everybody's
she will be a witness.
presumed innocent until
That's right.
proven guilty.
But there's a lot of smoke.
You will know.
Yes, I do.
If you were prosecuting this case, though, you'd feel pretty good about it?
Yes. Now, accessory after the fact.
It's hard.
This is a nuanced thing. She is the evidence against her for that is overwhelming. That carries up to 30 years in state prison in Florida.
Wow.
But the prosecution has been totally consistent. It'd be very tempting for less experienced prosecutors to go, okay, we're charging her with murder, but if you don't believe that, folks, we know she at least tried to help her son.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. They're all in, which I'm impressed by. It's the way it should be done.
All right, Matt Murphy, great talking to you. Thank you. We'll be following the case. All right, coming up for us, a whistleblowing scientist says he found high dioxin levels in East Palestine, Ohio, after that toxic train derailment, and that the EPA responded by trying to smear him. NewsNation just uncovered new documents that show the EPA was tracking him and trying to discredit what he found. We'll have that exclusive report next. And then later, it's a carnivore's dilemma, a tick bite that makes you deathly allergic to meat. It's happening all across the country. I'll speak live to one woman who went vegan as a result. Hear her story coming up. The Environmental Protection Agency is supposed to be keeping our air and our water clean, not conducting surveillance and smear campaigns against independent scientists. And yet, in a NewsNation exclusive, newly released emails show that is what was happening after the East Palestine train disaster in February of 2023. The target? An environmental scientist whose tests contradicted the EPA's narrative that there were no dangerous levels of toxins in the area. Local residents were told the official story. Their neighborhoods were safe, and some of those who dared to disagree found themselves in the EPA's crosshairs. This is just the latest example of EPA issues in East Palestine, and NewsNation has stayed on top of the story. Just last month, we showed you how a report found the agency in Norfolk Southern manipulated soil testing data following the disaster. NewsNation investigative correspondent Rich McHugh has the latest for us.
That drone just came over us now, didn't it?
Yep.
When environmental scientist Scott Smith began testing for toxins in East Palestine, drones were monitoring his movements. Someone was watching. Because months after the open burn of vinyl chloride and after the EPA told residents it was safe to come home, his test results showed exactly the opposite. Smith found extremely elevated levels of dioxins in the soil in East Palestine. In the spring of 2023, after we reported Smith's findings, and former EPA Administrator Judith Enck said the EPA should pay attention to Smith's test results.
His work should encourage the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency now to go and grab some other filters and do similar testing and analysis.
But that's not what happened. Instead, EPA emails show the agency began collecting Smith's personal information, tracking his movements, distributing his whereabouts to more than 50 EPA employees. They even circulated photos of his dog.
It's troubling because this is a matter of transparency and truth and protecting public health. What the EPA seems to have done here in East Palestine is they were more interested in controlling the narrative and controlling what was going out to the community, from the community and back to the community. They were definitely controlling the narrative of nothing to see here, no long-term health impact.
Smith continued to test on over 30 trips to East Palestine. RFK Jr. met with him in East Palestine and called him an extraordinary advocate for the people. Smith says taxpayer dollars should be spent on testing, not surveilling him.
They don't want to look for the full spectrum of chemicals that I look for. And instead of sitting down with me and having a dialogue for the benefit of the community, they launched this, smear and campaign and undermining it. It's, it's pretty clear in their own words. They're clearly not serving the community they're supposed to protect. And it's not just East Palestine, Rich. It's a systemic thing.
The emails show the EPA was also tracking residents, too, outspoken voices in the community like Jamie Wallace. She was included in some of the agency's weekly social listening reports.
You know, they tried to control this narrative and act like none of us had any long-term health risk, and we're not stupid. We see it. We feel it.
The EPA said in a statement, "We are very concerned by claims that have come to light over the past few months. The Trump administration is committed to maximum transparency, and as such, we intend to conduct a thorough review of decisions made in the aftermath of the train derailment. We will work to ensure the health and safety of the people of East Palestine." Wallace says that's not good enough. She has a message for the current administration.
I say it's never too late to try to right a wrong. We know, everyone knows. The EPA knows, the government knows, the U.S. citizens know that we got screwed. From the beginning, there were mistakes made, there were flaws, but you just don't continue to cover those up and forget about a whole community that's now gone from symptoms to long-term illnesses. What you do is you try to make that right.
In speaking with residents and with Smith, they say this ultimately proves what they knew all along. Now they say they want solutions and that it's time for a congressional investigation. Elizabeth?
All right, Rich McHugh, thanks so much. Coming up on America's fastest growing cable channel, from ossobuco to tofu burgers, all because of a tick? Yes, it's true. One bite from this tiny little menace could make you deathly allergic to meat. I'll speak live to a woman who was diagnosed with a little-known disease called alpha-gal syndrome next. And remember, you can download our NewsNation app for the latest news and top stories of the night. This summer's been dominated with headlines about an eight-legged menace that is barely the size of an apple seed. I'm talking about the dreaded tick. Every year, tens of millions of Americans are bitten by one, and 2025 has been particularly bad. Emergency room visits have spiked, especially in the Midwest. And it's the sheer horror of contracting a tick-borne disease that has people conducting full-body checks whenever they come in from the great outdoors. The main concern up until now, of course, has been Lyme disease. Up to half of adult ticks in some parts of the country carry the Lyme bacteria, and the human symptoms like facial paralysis and arthritis can linger for years. But there is an alarming tick-borne disease that is now sending shockwaves through some communities. It's called alpha-gal syndrome, and it makes you deathly allergic to meat and dairy. Yes, you heard that right. It's essentially turning people vegan. It starts with the Lone Star tick, which is the most common in eastern and midwestern United States, all the way down from Maine to Florida and Texas. The adult female is distinguished by a white dot, or Lone Star, on her back, and they mostly live in wooded and grassy areas. Some of those ticks carry a sugar molecule called alpha-gal, which, when transmitted to people, makes them incapable of eating anything from pizza to ice cream. Even smelling a hamburger cooking on a grill can knock people unconscious. Oh, and then there are the hives, the coughing, the wheezing that comes with using anything that has been touched by any animal byproduct, including lip balms, lotions, even some bottled water. A recent report in the New York Times said that the cases are so widespread, for example, on Martha's Vineyard, that restaurants there are having to roll out special alpha-gal menus. Joining us right now is someone who's had direct experience with the alpha-gal syndrome. Nicole Cooper is from Virginia, and she was diagnosed with the condition. Thankfully, she's in remission now. Nicole, thanks so much for joining us. So, how long was it between the time you think you were bitten by the tick and the onset of the symptoms?
So it's really hard to answer that specific question, because myself, like many others in our community, don't remember having the tick bite.
Right.
So we can only start to gauge it from when the symptoms got so bad that we sought treatment. And then even after you seek treatment, as the doctors try to figure out, since they don't have a tick bite to put it with, they run all kinds of tests and try all sorts of things. So for me, my symptoms got so bad, I landed in an ER in December of 2021. I had been having symptoms for probably going on a year to a year and a half, but we were coming out of COVID. And so some of the early symptoms, like lack of, not being able able to catch your breath. Some of the other issues that you think are just being sedentary through COVID, it was attributed to that. But I ended up not being able to breathe, ended up in an ER. They recognized a rash that I was getting on my arms, which had been happening frequently, and they ran a test. And then 2 days before Christmas, I got a call that I had alpha-gal. So that was December of 2021.
And when did you notice that you had this aversion or severe allergy to meat and dairy or any animal byproduct?
I never put it together. There's so much time between when you are exposed to alpha-gal, be it in dairy or in meat or in your lotion, your mascara, wherever it is. It's so hard to put the two things together, which is really another variable that makes this condition so hard to address and to treat. And so I was shocked when they wanted to run the blood test in the emergency room. And I was like, no, I hate ticks. I always wear my bug repellent when I'm out in the woods. I promise you. And they actually had to come back twice. And I said, sure, go ahead and run it, thinking there's no way that's what it is. And I was gobsmacked when I got the call.
So what kinds of things did you have to cut out of your life completely as a result of contracting alpha-gal?
So it seems like it's going to be so easy in terms of just avoiding meat. So anything, usually they say if it has hooves, but any mammal, cut out the meat. But that's a really reductive way of looking at it. As you said in your intro, there are so many other ways that you can be exposed. For me, I was fume reactive, so I couldn't be around anyone cooking meat. I couldn't use pans like my cast iron that I had cooked meat in, mammal in before. Dryer balls that had lanolin, I couldn't use them anymore. I would break out in a rash. Yeah, lanolin is derived from sheep, which is a mammal. So
wow.
If it has feathers or fins, we could eat it. Vegan, most of the time is a good indicator, but not always. There's something called red carrageenan, which is derived from seaweed, which also has alpha-gal in it and is popular in some vegan products. So you even have to be careful about which toothpaste you use, or if your medicine is coated with any kind of gel coating to make it easier to swallow, that's generally derived from gelatin, which is derived from mammals. It's really, and so it's in your products. And so for me, I had to change, of course, the way that I ate. I could not eat dairy for a long time. I couldn't tolerate anything, as I said, with the fumes or touching my skin that had mammal. But over time that began to, as I avoided it in my diet and my histamine levels began to be under better control, I could start to tolerate some things better.
And just super quick, how long did that last from all these how long were you symptomatic?
So for 2 years,
wow.
I was highly reactive, but for many people it's much longer, where we're carrying several.
Yeah. All right, folks, you heard it here first. Be careful. Nicole, so glad that you're finally back to normal. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for bringing awareness.
Yeah, alpha-gal syndrome. You can get it from getting a tick bite that you don't even know you got. Coming up, we're still waiting to hear when and where that meeting might take place between Presidents Putin, Zelensky, and maybe President Trump. We've got the latest details after that historic Oval Office visit yesterday. Plus, what might these developments mean for a potential prisoner swap? Believe it or not, the two bitter enemies have been quietly exchanging captured soldiers for years already, yet Russia and Ukraine. We're going to go inside Russia and Ukraine's surprisingly civilized trade in human beings. Progress with the Ukraine war peace talks? Well, that depends on your definition of the word progress. Tonight, a Trump administration official tells NewsNation that representatives from the United States, Ukraine, and several European countries will work together on a detailed proposal for security guarantees for Ukraine. The commission will be led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Meanwhile, the White House says Vladimir Putin has agreed to meet face-to-face with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. But that is not what the Kremlin is saying. Russia is refusing to commit to a meeting. But that wasn't President Trump's takeaway. Trump even said a Ukrainian prisoner release is in the works.
I think you'll see that President Putin really would like to do something else. I think when we set that up, when we do, I think it's going to be when, not if. I think you're going to see some very really positive moves. I know there's over 1,000 prisoners, and I know they're going to release them. Maybe they're going to release them very soon, like immediately.
There may be no one in the world who gets into bartering foreign prisoners better or more frequently than Vladimir Putin. And as we know, he doesn't just imprison Ukrainians. There are a number of Americans who are wrongfully detained in Russia in squalid conditions. That includes David Barnes of Texas, who was arrested in Russia in 2022 and sentenced to more than 20 years in prison. Barnes' sister, Margaret Aaron, expressed optimism on this show on Friday.
That's our hope, that this summit will lead to better relations between Russia and the United States, and that there will be a breakthrough in prisoner releases.
There's a new book out from two Pulitzer Prize finalists from the Wall Street Journal that uncovers what it takes to get those prisoners out of Russian jails. Joining us now are journalists Drew Hinshaw and Joe Parkinson, authors of Swap, A Secret History of the New Cold War. Great to have you here. You're getting rave reviews on the book. You know this stuff intimately well. What are the chances, as President Trump just put it, that 1,000 Ukrainian prisoners and, more importantly, some of these Americans who are detained in Russian prisons may be released soon, do you think?
Quite a good chance.
Really?
I would say. I think quietly thousands of prisoners on both sides of the Ukraine war, Russian prisoners of war and Ukrainian prisoners of war, have actually started to be released. Now, the Ukrainians and the Russians have become mortal enemies. They're fighting this existential conflict. And yet one of the only forums they have for talking is a military intelligence channel where they discuss prisoner swaps. And thousands have already gone back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
On the question of the Americans, there are still a number of Americans arrested in Russia. David Barnes is one. The sentences are draconian. Their families say they're clearly political. The Russians have actually been on the record saying they would love to do a 9 for 9. They would love to swap prisoners with the US. If they did that bilaterally, it would be a huge deal. It would be quite historic. Actually getting there and getting that agreement will most likely be some kind of part of a broader agreement in the context of the talks.
But this, listen, we're not talking, this started decades ago in the midst of the Cold War, spy for spy. We had spies in Russia, in the Soviet Union. The Soviets had spies in the United States. And we would, our spies would get caught and we'd say, okay, you free our spy, we'll free yours. This is not what's happening right now. Russia is kidnapping teachers and basketball players and Wall Street Journal journalists, and the people who are imprisoned in the US and in Europe are convicted killers.
Right. That's why we wanted to write our book. We wanted to look at this 20-year history, because this is something Putin did from the very beginning of his presidency.
Kidnap people.
That's right. In his first month as president in the year 2000, he arrested an American, a guy named Edmund Pope. But Putin was a little bit sheepish back then. He didn't feel comfortable in his power. Bill Clinton picked up the phone, called him, basically said, "What are you doing?" And Putin let him go. Fast forward 20 years, this is a totally different Putin we're dealing with. This is a guy who does not think twice about holding Americans to ransom, using them to, using, like you said, teachers. David Barnes, that's he's a dad, an American dad who went to go see his kids, trading those people for spies, murderers, hackers, people of the worst sort. And we wanted to put a spot like that and show people exactly how that game is played.
Why does he want to get these people back so badly? Well, when you talk about Victor Bout or this killer in Germany who, murdered a Chechen separatist in broad daylight in a park. Germany did not want to free him. It was a terrible murder. Why does he want him back?
What you see when you dig into this story is that what Putin wants more than anything else are the deep cover spies. The spies who, in some cases, have spent so many years concealing themselves that their own children don't know their identity. You remember the TV show The Americans?
Yeah.
This is the Americans for real. Putin, as a young KGB officer, wanted to join the Illegals Directorate, and it's unclear whether he was actually turned down from the Directorate, but he's always valorized, he's always romanticized what he sees as this Praetorian Guard. And I think actually we often think of him as a czar inside his system where there's no accountability. He needs to keep these people happy, his security agencies, because that's the institution that runs the country.
So it's a reward. I won't let you rot in prison after you do my dirty work.
He needs to send the message. But as you say, over the last 20 years, the kind of people that he's been trying to get back and the kind of people he's been taking, it's become far more brazen. It's become a very clear tactic that he's used to take Americans with a higher and higher profile, and other autocrats have followed suit.
It's a fascinating story, especially the incredibly complex negotiations that go into freeing these prisoners, involving not one or two, but sometimes 7 or 8 countries, and the very lives that are hanging in the balance. Congratulations to both of you, Drew and Joe, on the book. It's called Swap. I have it right here. We're going to have you both back because you've done some great reporting, but you also have some interesting insight into Vladimir Putin himself as a man. So we will see you back on the show in the very near future on that.
Look forward to it.
Thank you both. All right, coming up for us, could the Menendez brothers soon go free? They're about to be evaluated by the parole board for release. Brian Entin will be there. He's filling in for Chris Cuomo tonight and joins me next. All right, the Menendez brothers, Eric and Lyle Menendez, at the end of this week will each go before the parole board and beg for their freedom. Brian Entin is filling in for Chris Cuomo on Chris's show tonight. You're joining me tonight. You're on your way out to cover that. Which Eric goes first?
Yeah, Eric will be on Thursday, 8:30
Lyle on
a.m.
Friday.
Yep, Lyle Friday, 8:30 a.m.
Do we expect the parole board to actually make a decision that day?
It's possible. I mean, they could. They've done it different ways before. Sometimes they'll make a decision on the spot. Sometimes they'll take it under advisement. But what's interesting is Eric and Lyle both have to speak, and they have to basically own up to what they did and repent to a certain extent.
That was Nathan Hochman's big thing. They need to admit they lied when they said, there was an intruder. They need to admit they lied all those months when they were spending all the money, and they're going to have to do all that in order to win their release, and they want out.
Yeah, and how far will they go? And is it possible? I mean, to think about this. What if they're separate hearings? They're separate cases. What if one gets out and the other doesn't?
Fascinating.
Yeah, because they also consider what they did in jail, and remember that. Eric had more issues in jail. He had some infractions and stuff. Lyle didn't. I'm sorry, Lyle had some infractions.
I thought it was Lyle who did that. Yeah.
So, it'll be interesting to see. Wouldn't that be something?
That would be something. All right, well, you're going to be out there covering all of it.
I will.
Great assignment.
Even tomorrow morning after I phone for Chris.
Okay, well, you have a great show tonight. Have a good one.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.